Well, good morning and welcome to Coffee with Ken. I'm Ken Biberaj, a managing director at Savills, a leading tenant advisory commercial real estate firm. In the news today, Kathy Hochul is the new governor of New York, first woman ever as governor. And lawmakers have urged President Biden to delay his withdrawal plan for Afghanistan as Americans are still trying to escape. Today's topic is the digital transformation of consumer engagement. We're joined by my good friend, my God, like 20 years now, Kabir Shahani, the CEO of Amperity. Great to see you, man.
Great to see you, Ken. Thanks for having me on.
I love your little home office setup. I mean,
Yeah, and I'm usually, I'm talking to a commercial real estate broker. I'm usually not in my home office. Anyone on our team will tell you I'm 4 days a week back in the office. Today's just a little bit of an exception. So
I always said you're just a walking super spreader, but it's listen, like the last 16, 17, 18 months, whatever it is now, I mean, it's been trying and hard and crazy. What's it been like for you personally, for your team, and also for business just in general? I mean, how has it been? Just get a quick kind of, recap of all that.
Yeah, the personal update is, fortunately not too storied. We've been one of the lucky ones where our family has been pretty shielded from it. And so I feel super grateful for that. And so our kids' school has been super safe. And, they were early on said, look, little kids can't learn over Zoom. And as long as your kid keeps their masks on, they wash their hands 50 times a day, and they've been super safe. So we've been very lucky in that front. And, the Pacific Northwest is a beautiful place. There's a lot of trips you can take by jumping in the car and being outside. So on the personal front, we've been super, super grateful and super fortunate. Professionally, it's been interesting, the chapters that we've all gone through this period. Certainly starting when everything kind of broke. As you might know a little bit about our business, we focused exclusively on consumer brands. So 86% of our revenue came from industries that were directly impacted by COVID. And so when this all first happened, we had no idea what was going to happen. And maybe a little bit to the conversation today, we were really pleasantly surprised that over time, all of our customers, without exception, and many of our prospective customers really looked at it and said, hey, this is a great opportunity for us to accelerate digital transformation. So I'd say, at a high level, we certainly saw an unexpected level of tailwind through the situation. But, from a company building perspective, I think it's been pretty difficult. We tried to take a very disciplined approach to how we ran the business, of course, pre-COVID, but, particularly in a period like this, needing to be able to just have a lot of systems in place to make sure that we're supporting all of our people. And if we go back to those first 6 to 9 months, just so many challenges with ensuring that everyone had the tools they need to feel, mentally strong, to feel supported. And our team did an extraordinary job of coming up with programs where, people on the team were having deliveries every week or two of, fun little treats, and we were doing games and online events. And, I'd say we've been on the sort of forefront of trying to get to be more collaborative. So, my exec team has done our offsites, in person every time since the pandemic started. We've been outdoors, masks, spread apart, but we just still felt like being in the same physical space was super important. And, even up until recently, opening back up our New York office, as well, opening back up our Seattle office, making it available for those that, feel comfortable, and making sure that those that don't feel comfortable, don't feel, judged, or there's no repercussions for that. So trying to be super flexible and supportive.
Well, it's a delicate balance, right? You're a fast growing early stage company. I imagine you've onboarded people during this time who you've never met face to face. So you're trying to integrate and get them going. I mean, how's that been in terms of like recruitment, retention, growth? How is that accelerating? I mean, what percentage of your people probably are new that, maybe weren't there pre-COVID?
Yeah, we've doubled the size of the company in the pandemic on a people basis. And so that certainly has been a really interesting dynamic and hiring and onboarding. And I think, as you talk to, leaders across many different companies, they'll tell you there's a bunch of new dynamics that creates, which we can talk about, that certainly no one predicted or expected. Again, I think we've been really fortunate. Our team has developed something actually after this meeting, I've got this, which we call Amperity University. So we've got a pretty rigorous, set of 2 weeks to onboard. And of course, that's all virtual. But being able to actually have a systematic way that people get exposed to the culture and better understand, who we are and how we do our work has been kind of an important part of it. I think that coupled with, and, trying to as safely as we can encourage, onboarding to happen in the office, right? And saying, hey, there's certain things that are just more difficult to do over Zoom. We're not believers that you can build a company entirely this way, or that the world will just operate where everybody's behind a screen forever. We think there's going to be more of a hybrid view of the world. We don't think it's all back 5 days a week either. We think it's there's going to be needing to have opportunities for people to gather, whether that's your onboarding, whether it's, big team meetings that are a few times a week, whether it's collaborative sessions. And so it's been helpful to be able to have a lot of space. That's one of the things, we're super spread out. There's obviously not a lot of people using our offices, but that actually creates opportunity, right, for us to be able to get people, together and collaborating.
Now, look, you're a super dynamic in-person kind of guy. I thrive in that environment as well. I'm so desperate for interaction. I created a virtual talk coffee.
Yes, totally.
Clearly. But, just getting out there with customers, right? Like, I think you, more than any, CEO I talk to, I think you love rolling up your sleeves and getting there with the consumer, figuring out their problem, trying to solve it. How has that been too, in terms of like, you're signing every day. I tune in. It's amazing. You're pulling in the biggest of companies, from the Patagonias of the world, to the Tapestries and Starbucks of the world. How has that been going in terms of like the selling and you adjusting from what's your probably biggest strength, being in person and actually, dealing one-on-one with folks?
Yeah, no, it's been, again, I think on a few dimensions, pleasantly surprising. One, we've actually been able to do deals and build our business entirely virtually. In that way, because at our scale now, which is still small, but we're growing fast. The account teams that are working with the customer teams, this is happening, and frankly, I think we can get more done because we're limiting the number of meetings that you have to get on a plane to go, down with somebody. And so I think that's been a really pleasant surprise, and we're going to continue to encourage that. Like, hey, let's not jump on planes unless it's really necessary. Yeah. That being said, these decisions for our customers are strategic. And so they're in many cases going to continue to want to spend time and build those personal relationships, as you mentioned. And I do believe those are really important. And believe it or not, there have been many meetings that have happened, in person safely, particularly post-vaccine. I think that was really the turning point for us. Is once vaccines happened, people want to get together and they want to meet. And so while it may not be, hey, I'm going to fly across the country to sit in a conference room with 20 people to present on a technology solution or go through, a whiteboarding session, certainly it is going to be, hey, I'm going to jump on a plane to go see, senior executives with our customers or prospective customers, and vice versa. In fact, just back in June, we hosted a consumer CEO dinner in the Seattle area. And we had 25 people show up, 25, really well-known, really experienced and well-respected CEOs of consumer brands. We've got one in LA in October. We've got one in New York later in the year. And so we are finding that people, when they have the assurance that everybody's vaccinated, when they have the assurance that there's going to be some distancing, are ready to take a little bit of risk and actually spend time together in those episodic ways, when it also makes sense. In those cases, when you get to spend, time in a room of your peers, when you get to spend time in a room learning together, it's a good use of time. And then I'd say the other area, lastly, would be surprised, is just in deployment. The fact we're in this new era where we can actually deploy, configure, and set up really complex enterprise software entirely virtually. And so I think when you take, that opportunity with being really intentional about where and how we spend time together, I think this conversation is a good example. I think if you and I hadn't seen each other, a month and a half ago in New York at our new office opening, it just creates a different dynamic, even in this conversation that we're now having virtually.
No, 100%. So let's take a step back. I mean, what's the problem that Amperity is trying to solve for companies, and how has your mission and focus kind of evolved over the last 4 years since you started it, right?
Yeah, we've been lucky. The idea of helping consumer businesses know their customer and really using data to serve their consumers, that hasn't changed since we started. The big aha for us was, hey, every consumer business that we love, whether it's our favorite airline, whether it's our favorite retail store, whether it's our favorite coffee shop or restaurant, they all have a lot of data about us. And we're seeing all this signal that they're not using that data, right? You're sending me messages asking me to download your mobile app, you're advertising products to me that I've already bought. Clearly, even the most basic data that you absolutely have about me as a consumer, for some reason you have a difficult time harnessing that. And what we found early in our research was that the root of that problem is actually a really hard computer science challenge, where you have a lot of these different silos of customer data that lives inside any one of these businesses. And there simply isn't an easy way to connect it. It's hard to do because there isn't the same key in kind of database speak that you would use to connect it. The scale of the data is massive, and ensuring that you can really be accurate as you try to bridge all that together were challenges that all of these companies have faced for 20 years. And so we spent 2 years, as you know, commercializing some research out of the University of Washington here in Seattle and inventing a way to do that. Inventing a way to connect all that data at scale where that consistent key across all those data sources didn't exist. And Amperity was born on the back of that research. And so, today that's still, the challenge. Somebody calls us up and says, hey, I want to be able to deliver a great customer experience. I don't know who my customers are. I don't have an easy way to be able to access insight and create insight around what they're doing with me and how I can best serve them going forward. And at the root of it is just not having that customer profile. And so by having software that not only creates it, but maintains it and allows flexibility in how it's used across their ecosystem has unlocked a ton of value for, what we believe are the world's most loved brands.
I just think back to some time and experience I had in the restaurant industry. And one of the things that was most frustrating to me, and I'd love to kind of get your take on whether Amperity is a solution for this for other restaurant, groups out there. You make a reservation on OpenTable. So Kabir gets it, you have 20 stars or whatever, then you sit at table 11, then all of a sudden the point of sale system is a different system. And it says table 11 ordered X, Y, and Z, ordered vegetarian this, and they love red wine. But there's no connectivity between that. And there's no connectivity between that and then my email system, which shows like that you responded and came and took that offer. So are these the, as a layman, right? Is this
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Now imagine that customer walks in, you immediately, when you hit check-in, immediately their preferences show up, immediately in the system you already have.
The guests that they have with them show up, and then all of a sudden.
Exactly. The server, now, there's so many great applications and tools that have been built. We see more and more handhelds, that servers are using. Imagine the server has, access to preferences and, oh, hey, I know you don't have gluten, or, hey, we've got a great new bottle of red wine on the menu. I'd love for you to try it. Just like that personalized service. It's an interesting example. Think about in an airline where, you're on a flight, you ordered the meal that you wanted to order wasn't available. In the case of Alaska Airlines, folks that fly Alaska Airlines a lot will know that the fruit and cheese platter is like this very popular item they have. And so imagine, you flew from DC to Seattle and you wanted to get the cheese plate, they didn't have it because by the time they got to you, they ran out. And you're now going back Seattle to DC, and the flight attendant walks up to you and says, Ken, really sorry we didn't have the fruit and cheese platter on your way out. I saved one for you on this flight. And that's actually very easy to do when you have this technology in place and you can feed the systems that already exist. And I think that's a big difference for how we think about the world. We're not trying to rebuild, your point of sale system when the guest comes and checks in off their OpenTable reservation. We're not trying to build the OpenTable. We're trying to make OpenTable better. We're trying to make Toast better. We're trying to make whatever tools that you're using work more effectively for you with better data.
So are you starting to see a pipeline of these potential providers, not the consumer brands themselves, but the open tables of the world and the apps and the programs coming to you now, early stage, to kind of get integrated in? Or
Yeah, the partner ecosystem for us is a
Right.
massive part of our business. Ensuring, if you think about it as a partner of ours, when we're in the mix, your value proposition to the customer just got better. You're more sticky. You're creating more value for them. So there's inherent incentive for all of our partners to have Amperity, in the game. And that's been a really fun part of building the business is being able to have that kind of surface area in which we operate while still being able to stay really narrow and solving a really hard problem for the customer.
So how big is the consumer engagement market? I mean, size this for me. Like, how much run already have in this? I mean, it seems endless.
It really, I'll tell you, not only does it feel endless, and I agree with that, both and I'll give you some of the economics on it that have been growing pretty dramatically, but it's also in terms of when you think about the businesses and use cases and things that you can do for customers. I always say to folks, when you start a company, you have this like big, bold, ambitious vision, and then you get punched in the face. And reality just keeps hitting you, and you kind of whittle that down and down and down and down. And probably the most surprising thing about building Amperity so far has been that we've had the opposite experience. We started and said, hey, there's a really gnarly problem around connecting a bunch of customer data and creating a unified ID. We're just going to go do that. And we think there's a multi-billion-dollar business just doing that. And what's crazy is the kinds of things that are natural extensions of what we can do for customers is so obvious and creates the market opportunity so much bigger. And so maybe I'll kind of quickly describe that journey, and then I'll talk about the economics of it, because you think about, we started, really nerdy academic research. Let's just find a way to solve this identity problem. It's really hard to do, requires a bunch of machine learning, requires a bunch of great PhDs. Let's solve that. So we solve ID. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, we got to give our customers tools on how they want to use that. I mean, the first version of Amperity was literally just a stream of data. Like, customers dumped all their raw data into a box. Our system did its magic, and we just sent them back a stream of data. And that was the product. And we had customers paying us real money for that. And we said, gosh, imagine if we could actually give them tooling to actually kind of manage that data in some way. And so that looked like, for example, how do you query that data? How do you create databases on top of that data asset? How do you manage change controls and the way in which that data is changing over time? So we built a bunch of tooling that became the second product, AMP360. And then our customers started coming to us and said, hey, well, the most data that we have about our customers lives in the Amperity software. So can you tell us something about these customers? Can you give us some customer insight? And that's when we acquired Castora, as you know, in New York, leading customer analytics company, to now be able to deliver in AmpIQ a bunch of customer insight, which is here the most strongest performing segments of customers. Here's the next best predictive models on who you should target, next best customer, next best action, and actually delivering all that insight. And these are all just such natural extensions of one another. And to now, this kind of overall customer data platform market is, at a minimum, a $68 to $70 billion market. I mean, every single consumer business on the planet needs to be able to know their customer. And it's an endless, to your point, endless stream of consumer businesses that are constantly being created. And of course, we're seeing a lot of growth in that sector right now.
Huge. So you're coming off the heels, $100 million raise, $1 billion valuation, kind of puts you in a unicorn status in the truest sense. How do you think about the next 3 to 5 years? I mean, as you've talked about kind of identity problem, product development, consumer insights, those all kind of like evolved in each iterative cycle. So how do you forecast and plan at this stage of like a unicorn status for 3 to 5 years out?
Yeah, it's serve customers, like it's exactly what's got us to this point is listening to our customers and being deeply engaged with them. And, one of the greatest compliments I get from our customers is they say, these are massive, well-known household name consumer businesses. And they say, look, we work with hundreds of partners or thousands of partners, and you're by far the most consumer obsessed company we work with. And that to me is the essence of, if we can keep obsession on what our customers are trying to do and how we can enable them and how we can innovate with them, the period is endless. It's a really interesting spot to be in, because our customers also make it really easy for us. Like, these are really cool companies with great missions that serve customers really, really well. And so it's easy to get inspired and motivated to innovate with them and build with them. So strategically for us, it's about deepening that engagement. And it's of course about scaling, right? Like, our big challenge is we just don't have enough people that can go help customers on this journey, before they're actually a customer with us. We so overinvest in our existing customers and wanting to ensure that we're continuing to innovate in engineering and product. And we have a really robust client service organization. And so that's where we put, if we have to make a choice, that's where we invest. And so a lot of this fundraise is about, hey, let's, ensure that we can get as many great people on the team as possible. And so, plug for amperity.com/careers. We've got something like 70 plus open roles right now. And, we're just trying to get as many great people that want to be on the journey with us.
It's incredible. So taking a step back in a macro sense, right? There's a lot of concern and talk these days about consumer data, about privacy issues. Talk about that, right? I mean, you're connecting all these dots, right? So naturally there'll be kind of some concern about that. How do you think about that? Do your customers ask about it? What are consumers thinking about?
Yeah, that's exactly, the focus of our business. It's really extraordinary, Ken, how little any of us knew, even speaking for myself prior to my life at Amperity, of how much data is out there about us as consumers. Mm-hmm. And for 15, 20 years, there have been many industries that have profited handsomely off of capitalizing on our data without our permission. And so you have these massive data consortiums that are out there that sell data about you and me today to brands and monetize that. And it's data that we don't necessarily want. We certainly don't want those third-party data consortiums to have. And they're selling it to brands that we may not do business with today and want to do business with.
Yeah.
And so that's been a big part of our mission, is being customer first, privacy first. And so the data that Amperity is entirely about your first party data, which means that's the data that the brand already has about you or I. I want Alaska Airlines using the data they have about me. I've already given it to them. I know they have it. I want Nordstrom using the data they have about me. I've already given it to them. I know they have it. It makes my experience with them better as brands that I already love. And so we're entirely about the data that the brand already has and the consumer knows the brand already has, and harnessing that, which actually makes the compliance and privacy officers in these companies thrilled. Allows us to be on the forefront of what these regulations are, whether it's GDPR in Europe, whether it's a California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA here in the United States, and we're going to start to see this across the country more and more. We are very privacy friendly because we focus on that data in a software driven way.
That's right. So you're in Seattle, obviously a magnet for talent, for innovation. You're expanding in New York, talent, et cetera. How are you thinking, like a big part of what we've been talking about on the series is just kind of, the trends coming out of COVID as even to geography, like finding the talent, being nimble, you as a company looking to build and grow with a priority of kind of in person and connecting with people. How do you think about geography domestically, internationally? How do you think about growth and like kind of meeting talent where they are? Level. I mean, this is a kind of broader conversation.
Yeah. I mean, going back to our conversation earlier, we are big believers in in-person collaboration. And that means like whether you're in the office, 3 days a week, or you're on a team where you have access to the office when you want to have meetings. Yeah. But that collaborative time is important. So we absolutely are focusing on geographic sort of, centers of gravity. Seattle and New York being the two largest, as you know. And again, credit to you and your team for just doing such a spectacular job and getting us into such a great spot in New York and setting us up for growth there, and being able to have, and these markets are a little different, as you know better than I do. Our population of ampers, as we call them in New York, are heavier office users because of the way the culture is in New York and the apartments versus, Seattle's a little more spread out. And so these are just different dynamics. And so we absolutely are trying to organize, people around those sites, as we call them. We also are thinking about the idea of a remote site. And so think about where now, rather than if you're on a team that's in Seattle, you can work with people that are ideally mostly in Seattle. You'll have some people kind of course, always remote. Versus if you're a remote employee, you're not always, looking at a screen with a bunch of folks in a conference room. You're looking with other remote people. And so being able to organize the work and organize the teams is a really important part of this. Europe is really exciting for us. Right now, we have plans for international expansion in 2022. We're a little bit on pause given, can we get our people there, in the COVID situation. And so we're waiting to see how both regulations and most importantly, just the overall, health of the situation kind of improves based on that. But I do think we're going to be more in a, we're not betting on a hire them anywhere and figure it out. We are trying to be very organized around where people are and how we enable collaboration.
Fantastic. And look, before I let you go, I'd love to just a second or two on this amazing board you've been creating. I mean, I feel like you look at your board of directors as it's star-studded. I mean, tell us, how have you been thinking about your board, your advisory group, and people who kind of help guide you to the next level?
We're incredibly fortunate, Ken, that we've been able to attract, across the board, no pun intended, people that, are really massive amplifiers of the business. I mean, we're talking about, you can kind of go through as we write the story of Amperity, the chapters following every single person that has joined our journey. There will be a really fun set of stories that follow that. And look, the easy version is it starts with the quality of the person. And, I know we've got a lot of big names. We've got people that are incredibly accomplished in their careers. And most importantly, these are incredible human beings that care about building a great business, supporting the people on the management team and in the company that are working very hard to build the business, are excited about innovating and want to have fun. And I think when you get people that have the right intention, it unlocks tremendous creativity and tremendous partnership in the boardroom. And I'm so grateful for both the people and the dynamic that we have as a team, on the board.
Well, Kabir, always great to see you. So excited about what you've built, about where Amperity is headed, and always great seeing you, my friend. Really appreciate it. Everyone tuning in, thanks for watching. Have a safe Labor Day weekend, and we'll be back on September 8th with Paul Rykoff, the founder of the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, in the lead up to the 20th anniversary of September 11th. Visit coffeewithken.com to tune in on past sessions and sign up for future ones. Kabir, talk soon.
Great to see you. Thanks, buddy.